Longtime Warriors coach and former Bull Steve Kerr recently had some comments about Steph Curry as well as Michael Jordan. The basic summary of his points was saying Steph Curry was the quote-unquote modern day Jordan. At face value, this claim seems pretty outlandish and is very bold, as when it comes to current day players, the guy who's compared to MJ constantly is LeBron James, and comparing Steph versus MJ at face value seems pretty odd, as Steph Curry is a 6'3" point guard who's a sniper, and MJ is a 6'6" shooting guard who rarely shot threes. But when you really dive deep into it, it's not that crazy to say Steph Curry is the modern day Michael Jordan. And looking at the first similarity in both these players, it has to do with their dynasties and their championship teams. As when you think of the Bulls till this day, immediately Michael Jordan comes to mind and his 6 championships in 8 seasons. And when you mention the Golden State Warriors, the exact same thing happens, as Steph Curry is by far the first name you think of. As for his career, he won 4 championships in 8 years and made 6 final appearances. And looking at both Jordan and Curry's team, in the last 30 years, they're the only 2 teams to make 6 finals appearances in 8 seasons. And looking at all their championships, both MJ and Steph had a weird gap in between championships, as Jordan retired for nearly 2 seasons, and Steph Curry got injured in 2020 and only played 5 games. And one more similarity, looking at Jordan's Bulls, they maxed out at 72 wins in 1996, compared to Steph's Warriors, who won 73 games and barely edged out MJ's Bulls for the best record of all time. And looking at both those seasons for Steph and Jordan, they both averaged 30 points and won MVP. Of course, Steph was unanimous, getting every first place vote, and MJ was nearly unanimous. And I do want to throw one more thing in there. In NBA history, they're the only 2 MVPs to win 70 plus games, a record I think might be unbreakable. And staying with the 2016 Warriors, of course, they did not win the championship, but the following year won 67 games, and the playoffs went 15-1. And for modern day fans, this Warriors team is regarded as the best team of all time, compared to Jordan's Bulls, who in 96 also have a claim to be the best team in NBA history. And one more similarity, both Jordan and Curry's teams are considered by far the best squads of their era, as both the Bulls and Warriors were the best offensive team, the best defensive team, and had a stacked Big Three with great depth. And looking at Steph and MJ's titles, I do find one thing pretty interesting. Their 4th championship evoked tons of emotion. As for Jordan, his 4th title, it was so meaningful because his dad had passed away 2 years prior. And for Steph Curry, winning his 4th championship, he overcame numerous injuries, a roster overhaul, not having Kevin Durant, and of course, won his first Finals MVP. And looking through NBA history, I would argue Jordan and Steph's 4th championships are up there with the best revenge seasons of all time, as once again Steph Curry proved the dynasty wasn't over, and Jordan 96 showed once again he was the top dog, and the 95 loss versus the Magic was a fluke. Now, looking at the second reason why MJ and Steph Curry are so comparable, both these guys changed basketball forever. And of course, it's no secret, both Steph and MJ, they're elite scorers, but the way they get buckets couldn't be more different, as Steph operates on the perimeter taking 10 plus threes, compared to Jordan, who does his work inside the arc with around 10 mid-range jump shots. And looking at Jordan's scoring, what he did for the dunk is very similar to what Steph did for the 3-point shot, as back in MJ's day, having a highlight dunk and winning a dunk contest was the utmost importance, compared to Steph's era, where shooting from 35 plus feet is commonplace for kids in college, high school, and even middle school. And I think it's pretty unanimous, the 3-point contest nowadays is vastly more important and impressive to fans than the dunk contest, in large part due to Steph Curry. And one thing I do want to highlight, yes, Jordan and Steph were vastly different in how they scored, But looking at their contemporaries in their time period, both Jordan and Steph were roughly 5 years ahead of the curve of their contemporaries, as Steph back in 2016 made a staggering 402 threes, compared to James Harden, who was third with 236. Don't get me wrong, making 236, even in 2016, was highly impressive and even historic. But nowadays, that mark for the modern NBA is commonplace, as back in 2016, we had a total of 7 players who made 200 plus threes. Compared to last year, we had a staggering 18 players, nearly 3 times as more. And looking at 2016 once again, teams back then took an average of 24.1 threes, compared to now, we're taking 34.3. That overall increase of nearly 10 3-pointers is because of Steph Curry, his immense impact, and his great long ball shooting. And much like Steph Curry back in MJ's time, he was highly influential for the mid-range jump shot. And when it came to his rivals and contemporaries, in that regard, he was light years better, just like Steph Curry. As looking at 1997, the first year that kept these stats for mid-range shooting, Jordan that year had a staggering 199 more makes in the mid-range than the second place finisher. And just like Steph, it wasn't just the volume, but also the efficiency, shooting a staggering 48.9%, which ranks second among qualifiers. My overall point being, looking at Jordan and Steph, whether it be mid-range shooting, 3-point shooting, half-court shots, these guys for their era were light years ahead of the best shooters and the best players. And looking at kids playing basketball today, whether it be in India, China, Zimbabwe, Australia, all these kids are shooting threes like Steph Curry. Very similar back in the day, where kids wanted to dunk like Jordan and be like Mike. Now, looking at the third similarity in both Jordan and Steph Curry, we have the killer instinct, as both these players are go-getters late in the games in the pivotal moments. And Steph, just like Jordan, is very petty when it comes to media and critiques of his game. As after last year's finals, when he won MVP, he very directly called out Perkins for doubting him and the Warriors dynasty. Just like Jordan back in the day, when it came to Dan Marley, George Karl, Byron Russell, B.J. Armstrong, even Karl Malone. The way both these guys approach the game, it may be different. When it comes down to it, they are both straight killers. And for Steph Curry, he does it with a smile, and MJ does it with a scowl. And like Kobe said back in 2016, don't be fooled by Steph Curry and his smile, because at the end of the day, he will rip your heart out and be a straight killer. In this regard, MJ, Kobe, and Steph are all very similar. And once again, do not be fooled by the baby-faced assassin. And last but not least, looking at both Steph and MJ, when it comes down to it, they are both very relatable figures. As Steph's path to the NBA was nothing but difficult, as in high school, he was not a big-time recruit, a 5-star guy, and he barely got a scholarship to Davidson. And when it came to the NBA, he was viewed as scrawny, awkward, and his 3-point shooting wouldn't translate to the big game. And with that being the case, he fell all the way to the 13th pick and was highly undervalued. And when it came to his first couple of seasons, he had major ankle injuries, numerous obstacles, and difficulties to becoming an MVP. Steph's overall inspiring backstory is extremely relatable for NBA fans. And unlike most superstars, he is not some 7-foot monster throwing down dunks and catching lobs. And even looking at Jordan, his backstory to the NBA was simply iconic. As everyone knows, he was cut from his varsity team and had to play on JV for his sophomore season. And even looking at UNC, right away he wasn't a starter or a big-time player. And when it came to the NBA draft, he was the 3rd pick behind Hakeem as well as Sam Bowie. And looking at his overall career, it is definitely story-like in its evolution, as coming in, he had to prove himself as an NBA star and one of the best players. Once he did that, he had to battle in the playoffs, going deep, getting beat multiple times. He didn't give up, and finally overcame adversity and won 3 straight titles. Then he retired, came back, won 3 more, retired again, and set off in the sunset as a Washington Wizard. Looking at both Steph and MJ, for various reasons these guys are highly relatable to the average NBA fan. And when Steve Kerr calls Steph Curry the modern day Jordan, he is not saying he's a one-of-one copy like Kobe. What he's saying is that in terms of overall influence, changing the game, building a dynasty, Steph in those regards is the modern day MJ. Now, as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time.